My name is Bill Marion, and this is A Nose for Life. You know, occasionally on this channel we talk about Bigfoot and UFOs, because if you're in the mountains as much as we are, you might want to know a thing or two about Bigfoot and UFOs, so this video is about UFOs. Well, sort of. It's more about the US government and UFOs, and what I'm sharing in this video is not a conspiracy. Thanks to the Freedom of Information Act, thousands of CIA documents about UFOs have been released to the public. By the way, in case you didn't know, UFOs are officially called Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, because someone loves changing acronyms for no reason at all. The information I'm sharing in this video is from honest-to-goodness CIA documents pertaining to UFOs. In fact, you can obtain these same documents in many places on the internet because the CIA made all their information about UFOs public. In fact, the CIA claims that now all their UFO secrets are out in the open. Now keep in mind, depending on when you're watching this video, we're just a few months away from when the Pentagon is supposed to brief Congress on all they know about UFOs. Yes, that's right, the Pentagon is supposed to spill the beans to Congress about UFOs thanks to the COVID-19 relief bill passed in December 2020, and you thought we were just getting a check. Oh no, we're getting some UFO disclosure from the Pentagon too. So the timing of the CIA information dump makes sense. In this video, I'm going to try to summarize the contents of these CIA documents and highlight the ones I find most interesting. Yes, I'll be doing some speculating, and I will most definitely have my own opinions that I'm sharing with you. And share your opinions too by leaving a comment. To really understand the U.S. government's handling of the UFO phenomena for the past 70 years, we have to start at the very beginning of the UFO craze when the CIA developed UFO policy. Now, there's a lot of information in this video. In fact, there's so much information that I've broken this video down into two parts. Obviously, this is part one. A little disclaimer before we begin. The purpose of this video is not to debunk UFOs or advocate for their existence. While we will place these documents in their proper historical context, we're only focusing on the CIA files. Additional sources will not be used. And of these documents, we will only be examining the first couple of years of the CIA's involvement in UFOs because it's critical in understanding the US government's handling of the UFO phenomenon for the next few decades. We won't be examining the numerous UFO encounters contained in these files. That's for another video. These files were birthed at the beginning and during some of the most heated moments of the Cold War. In fact, it can easily be argued that the UFO phenomena is as much a part of the Cold War as the atomic bomb. As you'll see in this video, some of these documents may be alarming, and I do my very best to avoid confirmation bias in this video. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. But in the comments, you're more than welcome to jump in at any point and share your theories and opinions. I always do my best to respond to comments, and I'd love to know what you think. I believe if you watch both of these videos, you'll be able to understand the UFO phenomena in its proper context without conspiracy theories or media-driven sensationalism and come to your own conclusions. Now, let's get started. First, a little bit about these documents. A lot of these documents are redacted, which means some or a lot of the text is censored or obscured for legal or security purposes. And many of these documents simply aren't readable. This is a real problem because not all of these documents are dated, which is odd for a government agency, and sometimes the dates are redacted. Following a conversation between several people through memos is difficult when occasionally names and dates are missing or redacted. These documents weren't released in order by their date either. Occasionally, they're grouped by subject. In this video, I'm covering the first few hundred pages of these documents. Some people in the UFO enthusiast community are speculating that this information was released in this manner on purpose to muddy the water, but our main objective is finding the narrative through these documents. It was hard to find a place to begin telling the story. See, the information dump has a lot of information that was released many years ago through various requests using the Information Act I mentioned earlier. In fact, you may have heard some of this information before, but not like this. But you can't read any of these documents without understanding just a little bit about life in 1952. The early 1950s are often romanticized as the good old days, but the good old days aren't always good. Polio killed 3,300 people in 1952, not to mention the tens of thousands that were paralyzed because of the disease. The U.S. was in a Cold War with the Soviet Union and a very hot war in Korea. Americans were both intrigued and terrified about the atomic bomb. The two superpowers had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world, and even more countries were building their own weapons of mass destruction. The 1950s seem charming now, but never forget that a lot of people were worried about the future. The Red Scare gripped Americans, or fear of communism taking over the U.S. from the inside. We often forget that this was a time of paranoia. Still, despite all of this, Americans consider themselves to be prospering, with average workers earning $3,400 per year. A college teacher could expect to earn $5,100 per year. 3 out of 5 families owned a car. 2 out of 3 families had a telephone. 1 in 3 homes had a television. All of these things contribute to the general mood of the U.S. by the time the CIA begins to investigate UFOs. Since 1947, the CIA had been bombarded with reports about UFOs and people demanding answers. Most historians agree that the UFO craze that hit the U.S. in the late 1940s and 1950s began in 1947, when civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying his private airplane over the Pacific Northwest near Mount Rainier. Arnold spotted 9 objects glowing bright bluish white flying nearby. 8 of the objects were roughly disc-shaped, while the 9th larger object resembled a crescent. The 9 objects were flying in a V-shaped formation. Arnold reported that these objects were flying at speeds not possible by any known aircraft. Then the very next month, in Roswell, New Mexico, Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release stating that a flying disc had crashed on a ranch near Roswell during a powerful storm. Later in the day, as government scientists arrived in the area, the story appeared to change. As the Roswell incident circulates around the country, and as Arnold's story circulates throughout the country, everyone started looking to the sky, and literally thousands of UFO reports were filed during the next decade. It's important to note that the 2 incidents that are often credited for starting the UFO craze were reported by an expert observer and military officials. These first 2 incidents were not the result of a hoax. Maybe these incidents have been misunderstood, and in the case of Roswell, mismanaged, but it's never been suggested that either event was staged. The UFO craze didn't begin as a product of imagination. Speaking of imagination, Hollywood wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. In 1950, the motion picture Flying Saucer hit theaters. And in 1951, movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still and The Thing were released. These are just a few examples of Hollywood's UFO blitz. Hollywood definitely fueled the public's interest in UFOs. In later videos, I'll discuss a couple of books that kept the mania alive. People were talking about UFOs, reading about UFOs, and yes, reporting UFOs. So there are a couple of things we have to acknowledge before reading any official document. First, in the early 1950s, as wonderful as those years may seem, America was beginning a very different time, and there was a degree of uncertainty as the world was beginning to look like the world we live in now. It's important to remember that the previous generation saw the automobile replace the horse and carriage. Times were changing quickly. The Depression was over, and communication and travel had improved tremendously. But we were also at the very beginning of the Cold War. This is the atmosphere, the context of the first memo we're examining. It's 1952 when the CIA takes on UFOs. So in these documents, we learn that by the fall of 1952, the CIA was looking into the matter. Their first priority is to determine if UFOs pose any threat to national security. Now think about that wording for just a moment. Their first priority is not looking into UFOs to determine if UFOs exist, but rather if they pose a threat. No, I'm not saying that this is the smoking gun or anything like that. But what I was able to determine quickly is that early on in this investigation, the agency was taking the subject seriously. The CIA at this point is trying to determine the best way to look into the matter. We also learn in the memo that the American National Air and Space Intelligence Center has already been doing research on the subject, and that OSI, the Office of Scientific Intelligence, a department of the CIA, has been going through their research. But the research is underfunded, and for the most part, it relies on eyewitness accounts. Later documents will indicate that the investigation does have credibility, though. It's an objective investigation, but open-minded. Still, almost all of the reports are easily explained, but there are a few hundred UFO sightings that are not explainable. According to this memo, by 1952, a worldwide UFO monitoring system was already established, and pilots had been ordered to intercept flying objects on many occasions. The memo explains that by 1952, 1,500 reports had been filed. That's 1,500 official reports, and over 200 of these reports are unexplained. But the memo also admits that the public is charged with sensationalism, and the agency is warning against mass hysteria and public panic. Furthermore, there is great concern that UFOs could be used as psychological warfare by the Soviet Union, and the agency is curious if the U.S. could possibly use UFOs in psychological warfare. The CIA is considering that the very idea of UFOs could be used as a tool. This early memo also indicates that the CIA should establish what should be told to the public, one way or the other, to minimize the risk of panic. One of the main problems in reviewing this document is that it wasn't written for the public. This document was top secret, to say the least. Just like reading a text without knowing someone's tone or sense of humor, you know how that can lead to misunderstandings? Well, reading memos like this can be misunderstood. But at the very least, this document takes the UFO subject seriously. There is concern, and there is action, and a plan is being formed.
The United States air warning system will undoubtedly always depend upon a combination of radar screening and visual observation. The USSR is credited with the present capability of delivering an air attack against the United States. Yet at any moment now, there may be current a dozen official unidentified sightings, plus many unofficial ones. At any moment of attack, we are now in a position where we cannot, on an instant basis, distinguish hardware from phantom. And as tensions mount, we will run the increasing risk of false alerts and even the greater danger of falsely identifying the real as phantom.
Later memos will refer to the CIA's approach as attacking the UFO problem. As I'm reading through the documents, it's easy to follow what happens after this memo was sent out over the next year. Different departments and agencies are given tasks, and it's determined that scientific consultants should form a panel and be provided with information. These consultants are picked by officers and staff in the agency. When the panel meets, they are presented with information and also shown a movie that provides actual real-life examples of UFOs. And again, this was real footage captured by people from around the U.S. What happens the following year is shocking, and honestly, well, it's kind of depressing. But before we get into that, I just want to take a brief moment to welcome everyone to our channel. If you're already a part of our community, welcome back. If you're new, we make a variety of videos on this channel. No, seriously, we're all over the place, but it's a lot of fun. Whether we're creek dancing while exploring amazing mountain roads or talking about Bigfoot on a live stream, there's always a video you'll enjoy. So go ahead and subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Be a part of our YouTube community. Now let's get back to these documents. In January 1953, the conclusion of this panel is in this document, and in this document you'll begin to see the official narrative we've all heard when it comes to UFOs. First, UFOs pose no threat to the U.S. While the report doesn't go as far as to say that UFOs don't exist, it does say that no evidence is available to indicate the existence or use of any yet unknown to us fundamental scientific principles. It declares that the subject of UFOs is not an interest to U.S. intelligence, but UFOs are considered to be of operational interest. I'll let you figure out the difference. And again, psychological warfare is mentioned. So what happened? Just a year earlier, it was a matter of getting to the bottom of something that they were assuming was actually real. But now, just a year later, well, it's the same thing we've been hearing since 1953. And here's what I find funny. Reports continue to come in. Wedged between these major memos are numerous sightings, far too many to mention here. About 18 months after the panel's conclusion, it's decided that UFO reports are still to be collected, but simply placed in a file, unless the report indicates there's a threat to national security. In the months that follow, more memos circulate detailing specifically who handles the UFO reports. And at one point, the agency begins working with a state agency in California that's going to hoax a UFO to study the effects on people. You still here? Because that's a lot of information, and trust me, I'm not even scratching the surface. When it comes to the CIA's attack on UFOs, we've only hit a few of the high points during the first 18 months of the so-called attack. We're not even in 1954. Keep this in mind, you're watching a YouTube video. Even though the information is true, there's creativity in the presentation of this information. I'll let you decide how creative, but I'm sure you get my point. That's how we normally digest any information regarding UFOs. through creative entertainment. And entertainment satisfies our curiosity for a season. Steven Spielberg used official documents to create Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but that's not why we love it. We love Close Encounters because it provides a momentary feeling of satisfaction that a mystery has been revealed, even if the revelation is imaginary. But that satisfaction is temporary, and people are really excited about diving into the recently released documents. But what if the handling of the UFO phenomena is why there are so many questions and conspiracies? I'm going to shed some light on the documents we just covered in Part 2 and demystify some of the language. I'm not saying that I can explain everything in those documents, far from it, but I'll provide an evaluation in hindsight of the CIA's handling of the UFO phenomena from the very beginning. It might be that the CIA contributed more to the UFO phenomena than Hollywood by saying so little and denying so much. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and make sure you've hit the like and subscribe button. My name is Bill Marion, and this is A Nose for Life.